Right, this is going to be episode 46 of OverSight. Don't tune out yet. There's not going to be any, 2-hour dissection of a Twitter argument. The person in the bottom left-hand box gets to talk on this episode. We haven't actually... I mean, obviously that was kind of some sort of, life imitates art thing where... We basically, Avast was benched from a show he was even invited to, as well as every team and broadcast that he was involved with. But no, this is a serious show about more than 2 teams in the Overwatch League this time. So obviously, me and Monty, usual duo, again, maybe just make a lot of the comments about me, whether you like me, etc. That is my brand, by the way. I figured out a long time ago. Just as, Monty, a hater who comments is worth exactly the same CPM as a lover who comments. I actually figured out also the engagement from a Reddit comment that says you shit is identical to one that says you're brilliant. So bearing in mind, it's really hard in life to get people on Reddit to say you're brilliant. I figured out just go the other way. Just get them to talk mad shit, debate all your past, your history, maybe even speculate as to who you are politically, philosophically in life. Do all of that underneath a video where a bunch of nerds argue about whether the 4th best Overwatch player is actually the 3rd best to the death. That's also, marketing on a level no one's got to yet.
Also, my other favorite comment is when people start complaining that we talk about other games, because I guess they just have such an apathy towards history or learning things about perhaps parallels in other walks of life that may apply to this situation and therefore provide insight on perhaps where these things, these topics are headed.
The podcast is called OverSight. It's Overwatch, Monty. Games.
These silly cyclops with their myopic point of views.
See, Bren, ironically, did just become a Redditor. Who expected that? You don't realise how much... I thought your comment of all the people in that argument was about the most tame ever. Mate, you triggered Flim more than anyone when he said he was a Redditor.
I was living in his fucking head rent-free. Rent-free! I got him on a tirade, didn't I? For hours he was talking about me. It was unbelievable.
It's the way that is the ultimate thing to say to someone, though. You become a Redditor now.
One tweet, and his entire argument was based off of the fact that, listen, mate, just get hacks out, get a flame in. Let's have a one-on-one. Let's go. Let's get this going.
I like how your
literally
tweet
lives
made
in the same building.
So much money.
It
made Avast a bunch of money. How come your tweets can't make you money?
He DM'd me afterwards. He was like, please, can you do that some more? It was unreal. I made so much money from it on my stream. And I was like, yeah, pal, any day, just whenever you need it. But it's just ridiculous. One tweet, and it just went off. It was ridiculous.
Next time it happens, I really want to know, because like I said, Flame lives right below me in this exact same building. So I want to see if I can hear him screaming and his dog barking, not knowing what's going on, why this is happening.
Right, anyway, the guests for this episode, in the bottom right-hand corner, we've got Bren, better known as the other half of Brennan Sideshow, if that is indeed a thing. I don't know. It should have been. It should have been.
The Bren Show duo.
Exactly. You used to do your own podcast back in the day.
Butcher. Yeah, I mean, we're going to be starting that up pretty soon as well. So it's
Here's the thing, right? Reboot. I'm not fishing for compliments, as I clearly am. But that is one thing that everyone misunderstands, right? It's really easy when you're just a community figure to do a podcast. Have you noticed that whenever anyone gets a full-time gig, they just immediately fucking kick all the content stuff out the door and just go, well, I've got a job now. Second I'm not doing that job, I'm going to be drinking and or watching TV. That's it. It's pretty hard to keep a podcast going week on week.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, I don't know. The reason we did it, I mean, it's the same reason, I guess, OverSight had a big break as well. The Overwatch League was just kind of on a break. It's hard. There's not much information to go off. So, but no, we're going to be starting 7-Up soon. There's some leaks, some spoilers for you.
Thing is, you've also got your heart's got to be in it if you do a podcast, and I say that as someone who had what at the time was the biggest podcast in esports, where it was getting over 100k views every VOD, and we were literally so jaded. We started doing episodes once a month, and then when we did it, it was just literally so what do you think of stuff in Europe then? Yeah, the teams that are winning are good, teams that are losing, they got to step it up, right? Korea next, we were literally just going around the world like that, we were just mailing it in on a ridiculous level. When I look back now, first year and a half, fire. The last year, it was a little bit stretched at that point in time. Anyway, the last guest before I forget is obviously Bren's an analyst on the Overwatch League for now. And I mean, I know it's a lot of people. Feels like they're trying to get you out the door.
Leaks. Exactly. Every day I come closer and closer to getting fired. You have no idea.
Indeed.
That's all right. I'm always the firing insurance, Bren. Don't worry about it. If I haven't been fired, you can't get fired, is basically how it goes.
That's true.
The only thing that's bitter about that is Monty used to say that to a lot of the behind the cameras staff, last year. But anyway, that's to one side. So anyway, Hexagrams, another person definitely going to be Overwatch League for many years to come. Obviously partnered with Semler, my good friend from CSGO, who actually, I have to say this, that's one thing I do actually envy you guys for, is that because you get to just live in one place, go to the studio every week, it's the same place, you live by that. I can just see by the levels of stress decrease in Semler's life since he became an Overwatch caster versus when he was a CSGO caster, that it must be a much more chill life.
Semler's living his best life right now. And he's everything that he wants to be doing. He's the happiest I've ever seen. He's got an interesting living situation, just goes camping every weekend and climbing. And then every day I see him, he's oh, it's all good, bro. It's good. All right, good. And that's pretty much
He did recommend to me that documentary, Free Solo, about that Alex
that's good,
guy.
Yeah.
The problem with that, though, is since I know Semler's, I know he's not really going to do that type of climb, but since I know he's super into climbing, I was just thinking oh, fucking hell, how long's he got left? 2 years or something? This esports thing better really take off. Maybe it's time you come back on the circuit, Semler. I don't know if this living in near that, in California is for you.
Those are infectious, though. I mean, Semler is so passionate about it that you can't help but watch all those documentaries. I'm watching Dawnwall, Maru. There's so many great climbing documentaries. And I've never climbed anything higher than a tree, and even that didn't go well. But I like the documentaries.
Yeah,
I also,
really
to be fair, I also like to imagine, because the only other scenario is when people go and do the climbing, the key thing is you got to have someone to spot you, and check everything's okay, because you get worried when people go on their own. And the last thing I want is some sort of whatever it was, 127 hours later type scenario with Semler just looking down at his trap down, this is so sick. I can't even. I'm sweating bullets here. I'm probably gonna die. Are they gonna win? That's the last thing I want to happen at the end of this man's life.
Fortunately, he does go climbing with guides and stuff, so I don't think he's alone frequently. But yeah, the thing I love about Semler is he really is living the best Semler life right now.
It is.
He deleted Twitter from his phone, and he just rolls into the studio and he pulls up TweetDeck, and he just he's what are all the hashtags for the teams? And he just sits there and he's this is how you get the social media, and he tags them,
schedules all his tweets for the week.
all his tweets for all of his matches for the week.
That's genius.
I'm done looking at Twitter for a week now. Goodbye.
He's just pulls up climbing videos and just chills until the next match comes up.
People will think
that too, and just cursing at his opponents.
Yeah. People will think that's no big deal, mate. The amount of people in esports, I've almost just been pleading within green rooms, please stop looking at the grayed out comments at the bottom of the Reddit thread, please. You're working the job right now. It's going to depress you.
That's Richard Lewis in a nutshell right now. He's look at this guy who's insulting them. Richard, that comment has negative 100 downvotes.
I'll be honest, that's something I've learned a lot from Semler, is to just not give a shit about what people say. He's check your Twitter. People are nice on Twitter, but don't go on Reddit, man. You'll kill yourself. And I'm it's really good.
Anyway, let's start the episode.
We're doing a podcast, are we?
We are, apparently, yeah.
We're trying.
Yeah.
Get there.
Well, the thing is, actually, by the way, for my own channel, when I do those intros where it's a different famous person for the game that's relevant, the one that Sideshow made me is fucking fire. He has one where it's him looking up the definition of podcast, where he's saying about how, it's a 2-hour thing with lots of banter, where the guests aren't introduced for the first 20 minutes or something His actual intro is fucking fire. However he got it, he nailed it completely. So it was one of those little tasks I set him while he was just waiting to find out if Donald Trump would ever allow him to work on the Overwatch League again. Since that's the way in my mind it works, there's no actual discount. It's from Trump's lips to fucking Sideshow's ears you can come. All right, cheers. He just got on the plane, came over. So anyway, let's start somewhere, right? Which is, we've got to start surely with the NYXL against the Atlanta Reign. Surely this has to be a massive point of discussion on this show, Monty. Your beloved NYXL, the whole narrative, but wait until they play the Vancouver... No one needs to wait until they play the Vancouver Titans, Monty. They lost to the Atlanta Reign.
Okay, to be fair to the NYXL, they were never a team even last year that had an undefeated stage. They would always lose random matches here and there. I think it was clear they didn't prepare for the Atlanta rain. Also, Atlanta had Daco back in, which I think was a major factor because that guy is actually really fucking good. Yeah, somebody found him. We still don't know where we know where he was. I don't know why he was where he was.
And even if you did know, he'd tell you were wrong. So what's the point?
Exactly.
Yeah. I am loving that, by the way, as an aside, like the interaction, because for people who don't know, actually, maybe I'll explain this context. For people who don't know, Korea is not a country that is incredibly high on the press freedom index, and it's not a country where you expect to see things leaked about you unless you're like a K-pop star or something. Then there might be some like tabloid stuff there. But if you're just a normal person or a sporting person, like for people who don't know, in Korea there was a famous story in Esports in StarCraft 2 where Boxer, the legendary StarCraft player, his wife, who used to be an actress, used to run a team. It was called Slayers, and she literally was able to sue people who made memes that were disrespectful about the female player that they had on their team. Like in Korea, you can actually take people to court for that shit. Like, I mean, I say that now as though it's ridiculous. It's actually getting like that in the West, but at the time that was like, what? And so they go hard on the idea of like basically saying like things people don't like. And so what you're seeing in the Overwatch League now is all these Korean pros who just can't understand the concept that someone can like reveal information that they don't want out in public. And they seem really confused by that. And they get caught up in a cycle of like, maybe if I just lie and say it's not true, then that'll be fine. It's like, well, that will come back to bite you as well. But why would a journalist ever ask me about that? It's like, you just haven't seen. Like, all you need to know, Monty, is I actually asked someone recently about how it is currently in Korea in like League of Legends, etc. Mate, this is how bad it. I'll reveal it here because it's not a fucking League of Legends show, so who cares, right? Basically, the people in the Korean like press room were literally complaining, like, why are foreign people allowed in here when we're in here? Like, that's the world they live in. Like, you know that their press is like, whatever. Anyway, you get the point. So, I think
the craziest thing about Korean press is that you can sue somebody for defamation and win, even if you are entirely correct.
This is actually the same in the UK, by the way.
Really?
Yes, the law's the same in the UK. As long as it damages the person's reputation, even if it is actually true, I believe you can actually sue them for that.
Yeah,
which basically, Korea, by the way, for anyone who doesn't know, is like a system set up by elites to be like, if you ever criticize me, I will ruin you, even if it's true. Yep. It's like, obviously it's genius if you're a billionaire or some massive mogul or something, but it is pretty wild, isn't it? Like,
I've just accepted we live in a post-truth society. I'm trying to cope with it.
Yes, but enough about Bren's antics on the analysis desk where he tries to lie about who's going to win. Anyway, see the way I just tied that in seamlessly there? Exactly. So
Fluid.
Right. Come on then. Let's talk to him then. So Daco was back.
I think that this is so the one thing I've learned, right, from being in this league for such a long period of time is that with all the inside information that I get as to why a certain team loses after the fact that they lose, when you look at a match and you're like, there's no way they should have lost, you know. The number one thing is that, you know, every team can have an off day. You know, they can just drop a match or whatever, even if it's a little bit unrealistic. You know, like the in my eyes, Atlanta Reign being like a bottom 3 team at the time, New York being a top 3 team at the time, can still happen. But also a lot of the times when I look at these matches, and if a match happens and you can't really discern any reason whatsoever as to why there's been a drop in quality, a drop in play, it's probably internal stuff that just, you know, you can't really predict. Nobody knows, you know, and we will never know, you know. A lot of the time, I think probably around, you know, if I was to slap a percentage on it, probably 70% of the time when there's a match that's gone one way, the complete opposite way of what everyone was expecting, it's usually due to some internal factors that are just not public.
I mean, I just think NYXL didn't prepare. They played Philadelphia the day before. It was the first match of the next day. Why would you prepare when the Atlanta Reign were looking absolutely awful?
I think Atlanta was 1-3 before, I think. Or maybe
Philly always plays New York strong too, so that's something that they always want to guard against. I don't know, like they could have an off day. I feel New York schedules their off days of like all the teams that are like top 3 who would like just dump a map onto someone who they should beat. Like it's going to be New York. The only team that I really have like...
I take umbrage with the concept that New York would ever decide on which games not to try on and therefore potentially lose them. That is a dangerous narrative, Hexagrams. You're very careful.
Yeah, I mean, what kind of idiot? What kind of idiot would go all in on that one? The only team that would ever really surprise me if they just like completely beefed a whole match would be San Francisco, because I just like how they're just like, nah, 4-0. We have shit to do. We're out of here. You're lesser than us, and we're going to prove it constantly. But like, it's nothing against Atlanta, but I don't really care that New York lost to Atlanta. I think it's one of the it's one of those New York games that they're just like, oh, okay, and then they start losing a map. They're like, all right, do you guys just want to go get something to eat after this? Like, we're just done. Like, they check out like that.
Like,
and it doesn't matter.
It's a trap game because I think they put their resources into prepping for Philly. They didn't have a lot of time to prep for the Atlanta match. Also, they don't even play next week, so they probably are just like, oh, it's time for a vacation. And then they know that even if they lose, they have to play it. Their next match is against Atlanta again. And if they lose again, then we'll have, I think, a very real conversation about NYXL and the Atlanta Reign. But they have basically 2 weeks now of they don't have to go to Dallas this weekend.
I will say
go ahead, Bren.
I think that watching the game, one thing that pointed out that standing out to me was the fact that I think New York was not playing well. Obviously, because they ended up losing, but they weren't playing the typical New York. It wasn't.
They did a lot of weird stuff, like blow grav super early.
The number one thing I noticed was the support ult usage was just absolute dire. Right, it was just ridiculous. They were trying to win these ridiculous fights where they were down 2-3 members of the team. Jonax blowing trance, Animo's blowing the sound barrier, trying to salvage and turn around these fights. I think a lot of it comes down to as well. I think this was earlier in the series, but it was an underestimation of Atlanta Reign coming in, and Atlanta Reign just. Again, I mean, I think if I was playing against Atlanta Reign, I also would have underestimated them. They were looking
even the bad teams
pretty
are able to play well like that. I mean, what did Dogman say last night is that they play a very similar style, and so Atlanta gets to kind of sit back and not be aggroed on, which they struggle with. They can sit back and try to make a little bit of plays here, and actually Dogman got the better of Jonak in a couple of those engagements, which is stunning, and then you don't expect it. And then as New York, when Jonak is your first to die, you're like, well, what's our plan B? We've never had to have a plan B. What goes on now?
Also, Mono was playing like super bad too, and it was mentioned on the broadcast.
The most surprising part.
They were playing much more aggro than they normally do. Like they didn't look like New York. It was weird.
It was
that's how they lost to Seoul as well, right? They started trying to switch things up, like, oh, let's just play aggro. Like that's how the Titans win, and it's not how New York.
I think I got to give credit to Atlanta though as well. Like they didn't play scared. A lot of teams play into New York and they get kind of like frozen in fear. They're like paralyzed, like we can't move forward. It's New York. They're too scared. But if you look at Atlanta were very decisive during that match.
Yeah, if you look at the teams that are improving, it's that the teams are like just starting to hit W now. The teams that have been playing tentative and scared, like Spark and Charge come to mind, that they're finally like, you know what? If we're going to lose a team fight, let's at least initiate it. Let's at least start and play a little bit more aggro. Like, I think that's the trend going throughout the league. When you look at the top two teams, they're the most aggressive teams in the entire league, and people are trying to emulate that. You can't emulate New York style without New York's talent. So you have to try to just emulate the aggro style with whatever talent you have.
It actually did look a lot better, though, from Atlanta Reign. Like, Pokeball looked pretty good. Baby Bear was having some good games. Yeah, it was all around looked pretty good. Like, it actually made you wonder how the team was so bad before.
I mean, it also, you have to say there's probably several factors here, which is that Baby Bay had 2 days before the stage to start practicing with the team. So part of it was probably they're getting more used to, playing as a unit together, and having Daco back, obviously, like massive, because he already had that synergy with Pokebo from their time on Element Mystic playing together. So I think there's a lot here from the Atlanta Reign, but they certainly looked a lot better this week.
Yeah, and then in prior games, they weren't running Dogman. Kodak would come in, and I can't imagine 2 different personalities at that position either. So like they just never really ran the same consistent 6, and they're losing. So I think they're just trying to figure that one out. Like after Defran left, which should have been anticipated, they should have had a plan for that happening, because I don't think anybody had the odds that Defran was making it through an entire Overwatch League season. But they had to kind of scramble and figure it out and bring pieces in. And, I think they're still a mid-tier team that could beat a lot of good teams.
Right, Monty, shall we just go ahead and crack open a 6-pack of drama, have a few of those, and then get into the really important games? So, okay, last episode was we upset all the Houston Outlaws fans. Now we're just going to move slightly over in Texas to the Dallas fans, because, apparently at Monty, everything is bigger in Texas. Egos, delusions, fuck-ups, like internal drama, everything. So you made a tweet, which obviously was in your usual fashion, riled a few people up, where basically the implication was, since Dallas had a fairly easy schedule, their record looked really, really good, but everyone was kind of waiting in the analysis side of things for them to hit some of the good teams. So they didn't even really need to do that, because even though they lost to Vancouver, which is fine, everyone's allowed to lose to Vancouver, you're not allowed to get 4-0'd by Seoul. That is not what you're allowed to do if you're an elite level team. You've got to at least be in the game. So
I'm not sure about that. I think Seoul's getting Soul's getting so much better every week we see him play.
That's true, but the thing is the expectation is Dallas should be on the same tier, right?
Sure. Yeah, no, I agree. I was very surprised when we saw the analysts doing their predictions, and it was all Dallas across the board. Because in my mind, you know the way I do predictions is that I come into the day.
Yeah, tell us how you do your predictions.
Like, well, everyone's predicting this one, so I'm like, fuck it, I'll make it interesting. I'll throw in an underdog pick, here or there, or everywhere.
That's actually what I do as well.
Yeah. So and I saw this game, and I was thinking, if I was on the desk, what would I do? Probably go for Dallas. I think they're the underdogs here. Literally, everyone went Dallas. Literally everyone went Dallas. I was like, that's kind of weird. Did they all expect Dallas to win? And I mean, Dallas have improved. And I think in their last few games, they looked very good before that. I think, Monty, your argument is completely valid. The fact that they've been playing against weaker teams and been demolishing them, of course, they're going to look better. But I think as a whole, when you were looking individually at the performances of players, Note coming in, really enabling OGE. I think they are such a good duo. They were, at least, until that Seoul match. I mean, I think they still can be. But they had some great parts in that team that were working so well together. And then the Seoul game comes around, and I mean, they get admittedly pretty demolished. There was I think the last match was close to the last map, but at that point it's map 4. They've already lost the series, so it's whatever at that point. But what it looked like to me was that they were nervous. They were choking, a little bit shaky. They weren't on the same page when they were coming into this match against Seoul. And I don't know if they set themselves up mentally for this, because there is this kind of weird, I don't want to say forced rivalry, but it is a little bit of a forced rivalry from the old Lunatic High Envious days, right? From way back when these rosters existed. So maybe they got in their own heads in terms of that, but yeah, they weren't playing up to the same level from what I saw, at least in my opinion, coming into this match. So yeah, I mean, it's bizarre really, because I was quite high up on Dallas as well. I don't think I would have predicted them in this match because I still rate Seoul quite high, but
I mean, I think that there are other matches.
It's the Paris one, really, Monty, isn't it? Come on.
What?
That's the one that made you think Dallas is shit.
No, the thing about their other opponents has been like, first off, I thought Toronto was always overrated, even though they went 5-2 last stage. I mean, I thought this was a team that had very poor shot calling on the server, even though I think their coaches were able to design strategies. As soon as something weird happened, they just collapsed internally. And so they couldn't adapt on the fly very well without coaching. And then you come into this, we saw their performance in the playoffs. They got absolutely fucking rolled. And then you come into this stage and they lose a core player in Stellar, and they bring in this IM37 guy who's like a true rookie. The jokes about him being from open division to one match in contenders to coming into the Overwatch League. And yes, he's mechanically skilled, but I think it's way too much to expect Toronto to play around him well. And he's been so tragic after switching Ivy off of the Zarya, which I think was their only strength, was Ivy's mechanical ability on Zarya. So I question that roster move as well. To move Ivy over to the Brigitte on these GOATS compositions. So coming in, I guess I wasn't that impressed by Dallas's win over Toronto, because I think Toronto have been massively overrated. And then playing that close against Paris, when this should have been an upgraded roster, and I think is an upgraded roster, to be fair, with Note, they just seem to I don't know, they seem really streaky, and as soon as things start to go down, I guess I agree with you to a certain degree, Bren, that they seem to just implode mentally.
Yeah, I mean, I wish we had the thing in Overwatch that you can do in StarCraft at times, where you take the labels off of teams, because I think it's just human nature to be caught up in this bias that Seoul's going to be bad because they were bad all last year, and there's that, and then Dallas is going to be good because we want Dallas to be good,
yes, and I think I think that narrative of Dallas actually is really weird. I catch myself doing this too, because obviously I have a lot of affinity, even though there are literally 0 starters on this team from when I was casting in Korea and Envy was winning Apex. Part of me really wants Dallas to be good. And I think that's very common with a lot of people.
Yeah, there's also teams that it's good for the league when they're good because their fan bases are so strong. And just as human beings, it's really hard to disassociate yourself from that. I mean, I don't love putting a lot of blame on one particular player. With that Seoul game, I just thought Toby completely outplayed Closer. Closer has this this thing where he goes after these big plays to try to look like an all-star, and that's not really your Lucio thing. Like Toby getting those boops on Eichenwald's, that's closer's fault, kind of. Right. Closer needs to be there to knock him off the edge or just to not allow him to be in position there. And that won them Eichenwald, like right there. And it's not just that. Like, well. I look at like a lot of the top downs when I'm casting it, and then I'll see like, hey, here's all of Dallas. I'm like, where the hell is closer? Oh, he's trying to 1v2 a Zenyatta and Diva in the corner. I don't think that's going to work. Oh, it doesn't. Dallas has to reset. I thought he was going to be a huge upgrade to this backline, but I don't know if he's just not gelled with the team in a way that I thought he would. But like, yeah, I really thought he was a big problem for that loss to Seoul. And I mean, good on Toby for exploiting it, but I don't think this Dallas roster is as good as people think. And as much as I love Note, you are giving up some of that Sombra flexibility that RCK did bring. Note was good on like Hanzo and stuff, and they're trying to show he's flexible, but I think he's a great diva, and I think him and OG have played really well, but there's still issues on this team.
Will the meta switching help them?
Potentially. I mean, it depends on where the meta goes.
You don't know,
right?
Yeah, you don't know where the meta's going to go, so... I mean, we can speculate, but it's like, yeah.
I do think you're right, Hex, that like after, especially on that one Eichenwald, yeah, it was a huge game for Toby, but at a certain point, you have to say like, why wasn't anybody looking for Toby? Like after it happens the first time, you're like, oh, well, we fucked up. But after it happens like 2-3 times on that same bridge, you're like, shouldn't somebody say like, where's Toby?
You can literally see his path. After he does one, he like does a circle, then he doesn't try to boop, and then he's like, okay, again, and he just does that same path, right wall, left wall, over, and he's coming again, and no one's like, what?
I will say, put yourself in Dallas's shoes here in this scenario, right? It's map 3. They need to win this series. They're so close. They're literally, the finishing box is right there at the end of the second point of Eichenwald. Like they can see it. They've only got to push it in just a small distance. The comms are pretty hectic. They get booted the first time. Okay, mistakes happen. Whatever. Reset. The comms start getting a little bit more hectic. Suddenly information starts getting lost, and Toby just literally starts just running them down every single time. I mean, stuff like this will get lost in the system, especially with a team like Dallas, I imagine. Probably gets a little bit hectic in the comms. I don't know that firsthand, but like I can only imagine with the kind of personalities they've got on that team, where that is probably the case.
Yeah, but good teams won't get like fucking bodied by that over and over and over again.
The rest of Seoul was playing really well, though, so it was like a lot of stuff you had to worry about. I thought Jae Hong played exceptionally well in this matchup, one of his better games in the last couple of seasons. So Seoul is really coming together in it too, and it's just really interesting. They won this game pretty dominantly without Fissure. There's been a Fissure on the bench. Is he going to be the first guy?
What do you think of them?
I think he's going to be the first guy on 4 different Overwatch League teams, is what I think.
I've been a big advocate for kind of Fissure. This kind of, I knew as soon as they started Marvel on Fissure, right? From way back when, I was like, I was speaking to Josh about it, and Josh was like, well, why have they done this? Why have they done this? And I'm like, Josh, settle down, lad. Let me explain it to you, because I know all the info, right? And I was like, well, from what we've seen of Fissure, is that he's constantly moving around all these different rosters, right? We don't know particularly the reasons. We can kind of assume the reasons as to why he might be on these different rosters, but nobody really knows for sure. But Marvel and Fissure have very similar playstyles in terms of their main tank play. But I think the entire reason was that they can just bench Fissure whenever, if he starts theoretically acting up, and they can just kind of put him on the naughty step, if you will, and just say, all right, just sit over there, and we'll let Marvel play for a little bit. Marvel, I think, is a class main tank.
Do you think a player like Fissure responds well to benching? Is that the right way to deal with a Fissure character?
He always seems to be able to, sleep on it, wake up and be in a new team, so no problem. The analogy, Bren, surely would be that what happens is all these teams think like, they're in love with the idea of the big personality and the shot caller, and they've all played against Fissure and he's been amazing, so they're all like, oh, that's what I want, a bit of danger, I can be the one that changes him, I can handle him. And then when he comes in, like a whirlwind, just wrecks their life completely. Everything's just crazy. He's controlling. Eventually, it makes them appreciate someone who isn't, quite like that, but has other more subtle qualities, and they're willing to work with someone like that and build a long-term relationship.
Are you putting Fissure somewhere on the crazy hot scale?
Yes, basically.
Yeah, so actually, we should have already invented this term in esports, but we'll call it the Dardoch delusion, which is that every new team thinks they can uncrazy a player, but
Is this
it
a
never
league term?
actually
It
works.
starts with this ritual that you do. It's like a kind of banishing Monty, where everyone just agrees, almost cult-like, to say like he's reformed now. Actually, he's matured a lot in the time it took him to walk from the other team house to this house, and we're confident that he's going to be a productive, like whatever, like great teammate and all that. And then when he gets kicked, the next team, we also believe, it's like fucking hell. I always used to say this, Monty, because obviously Doublelift very well, right? That is really the narrative that people use for Doublelift in League of Legends. Because for people who don't know, he basically, for a long time in the LCS era, League of Legends, was famously like the best player that was getting nowhere close to winning the league. And when basically he won one championship, then got kicked out of his own team and went and joined TSM, which was the team with the biggest fan base. So what happened is, because the TSM fans had to somehow resolve the cognitive dissonance that they'd said this guy was a shit choker his whole career, but now he's on their team and he's clearly one of the best players. The lie they had to tell themselves was that in the time it took him to get kicked out of one team and join another the next day, that he'd matured as an individual. And I always used to say this, like, it's not like it's impossible to mature in, a month, a year, but it is impossible if you have to fit maturing and, reflecting on your life around playing 14 hours of League of Legends. Like, I'm going to go ahead and say that's probably not something you do on the side. You don't moonlight maturing while doing like a full-time children's video game.
Go to a community college maturing
exactly.
class, take night school.
He got the GED in maturing. Yeah, exactly. He did it by phone.
If I never hear the term reformed in conjunction with Overwatch again, I will be happy.
I do like that. They take someone who's just mildly a bit too argumentative and act like he was like a hardened criminal in San Quentin, and now he's like found God or something.
Being Doublelift's coach, like he wasn't that bad, honestly.
No, of course not. In fact, maybe this leads into the conversation, Monty, because I always said to people, and I think I've been proven right by history, I always said that the real trick with people like Doublelift, Dardoch, isn't that you're going to change them as a person, because it's so unlikely that they're going to, in a short period of time, change like that. It's that you've got to build a very special team around them. You have to find individuals who either don't care, they almost like can just take the abuse and they just don't care, they're just hardened, they just play the game, they're veterans, whatever. Or you find someone where they befriend him and that brings him down a little bit from being too kind of harsh on people. I wonder about Fissure in that sense, because if he goes to another team, it can't just be another signing and no one's thought it through. You've got to actually have a team that can surely fit his strengths. And it clearly can't be a Korean team at this point.
It's got to be like whoever his best friends are, really. It's like the only way I see it work. I don't know who that is, but yeah, maybe.
It is funny sometimes to see these players, and like I don't know enough about Fissure to know if this is true, but do you want to explain who Dardoch is so people know? Because like this is pretty infamous in the esports scene.
I'm lost to this.
That's all I know it's about League of Legends is that I have no idea what you're talking about.
Well, this one's actually an even more egregious one than the Doublelift one, because Doublelift at least has only been in 3 teams. This guy, Dardoch, came along in, I think, 2015. I think was the first year he came along. Let me think. No, 2016. So he only came along 3 years ago. And in those 3 years, I think he has played for 4 different teams. And remember, in normal League of Legends, you do a whole year in each team. So do the maths on it yourself there. Like, that doesn't even make sense that he's doing 4 teams. And what happened was, it was the same story in every team, like Monty alluded to. He's a really young player, but who is really skilled at the game. Like, he's like very, very good as a jungler. And if you know League of Legends, if you have a very skilled jungler who can carry, you can just like change your whole team around, basically. You could become the best team, basically. So what happened was, every team he got kicked out of for basically like attitude issues, like being too harsh on teammates, like being literally like willfully what would the term be, like insubordinate to people.
And this is
like
on camera too.
Oh yeah, there's a great documentary, by the way. If you don't care about League of Legends but you want to know about this, there's a documentary they made called Breaking Point, where they just filmed the whole season where he was on this team and the whole team goes to shit. And you just get to see, like, you literally get to see him. So everyone in this call must know who Steve Arneset is, the owner of Team Liquid, right? Liquid 112. The guy's literally like has a fucking Lamborghini, and at the recent LCS finals was like someone just noticed on camera he had like a $300,000 Rolex or something. Like, he's someone who's somewhat in a position of power, believe it or not, Bren. In this documentary, Dardoch is literally talking to this guy like he's just about to quit his paper round, and the guy just runs to the local newspaper shop, and like, that's like the way he's trying to talk to this guy as like, an 8-year-old kid.
you really should watch this documentary.
It doesn't have anything to do with League of Legends, don't worry. It's really fun.
It is like everything wrong with esports. And to credit to Team Liquid that actually released this, because it made them look terrible. Like
Yes, it did. It did.
But
so anyway, the gist of it was every time he would get kicked from a team, another team, obviously because of his skill, would jump up and be like, "Hey, we'll take him. Yeah, can I sign him to my team?" And it's because I had this term for it, Monty. Everyone wants a ticket in the Dardoch lottery because eventually someone's going to have the team that he can play in for a long time, and if they do, you've got a mad piece. You've got a really good piece who no one else wants. So I think it's a similar scenario personally.
So,
I mean, to be fair, it does seem like Dardoch has gotten better currently. Like this is all old drama that
Sure.
I haven't seen.
He was also very young, to be fair.
Yeah, surfacing recently. But one of the, like, to add to this and sort of connected in Overwatch was when Internet Hulk went to become the coach of Team Liquid when Dardoch was on Liquid.
Okay.
Dennis came up to me and he was like, "Hey, what do you think about Dardoch?" He's like, "I really think like he just needs better coaching." And he had the Dardoch delusion. He was like, "I'm going to be the one who changes Dardoch," and that's what he said to me.
Well,
and then,
Dennis was the eternal optimist.
Yeah, Dennis the eternal. So anyway, then 4 months later, one of the last conversations I had with him before he died, he came up to me. He's like, "I couldn't do it." I was like, I told him he couldn't do it, and he was like, "You're right. You were right, Monty." I was like, "I know."
Well, that should just be like the sign of like, if Dennis couldn't do it. So for the half of our audience who doesn't know about League of Legends, let me make is like an NFL reference because of course our audience knows that. Is it like the Terrell Owens, right? Is it kind of Terrell Owens? All right.
Yes, that's not a bad analogy because he also kept getting signed forever to the end of his career. Yeah. And by the way, if you notice, I'll even tie it in as well, Hexagrams. That's also, just like Terrell Owens' career, exactly the sort of team that would sign a Dardoch type person, or Fissure for that matter. The whole point is, there's actually no point doing it if you're a bad team anyway, because it's not going to improve you that much.
It's our last piece. We have a good locker room.
You've always got to be the team who feels like you're on the brink and you're the one-star player away, and you think that's why you think to yourself, look, even if it's only 2 years, surely we can handle this guy if he puts us over the top. But the problem is, obviously, unless you do get that aspect wrangled, you end up being the guy who's sending him packing a year from now.
Played on a broken leg in the Super Bowl for the Eagles, so I got nothing against Terrell.
I think, and not to say that Fissure is like at the level of Dardoch, but obviously
for a Korean though, in context,
we have to read into this to a certain degree based on like everything that's happened, right? Like there's no world where Fissure was not at least partially responsible for like via his behavior for these moves, because otherwise Gladiators would have never benched him in the playoffs. Like there's too much weird shit.
Yeah.
It's not like they benched him for like I like who they had to bring in like as a person, but like it's not the same level of tank play, right? So you're not like benching Fissure and like, oh, we're only losing a little bit. When you bench Fissure in your playoffs as the Gladiators, you're conceding that set.
It's like benching LeBron James, honestly. It's absurd.
Well, he was that good, right? Like all season
he was that
good.
good.
Yeah.
It's weird. Playoffs roll around. Now we don't want to win.
I mean, think about it. Here's what's funny,
Gladiator!
actually. I can even tie it in even further. So one of the reasons, by the way, I should have probably mentioned this aspect, actually. One of the other reasons why the Dardoch guy got a million chances is because in League of Legends, they have import rules, which mean that in theory, you can only have 2 non-North American players in your team. And so since he is North American and was really young at the beginning of his career and really good, it's like, unless you really did think you just couldn't handle him like on a personal level, there was a million boxes checked that other players didn't have. Well, similar fashion, Fissure is literally like elite tier Korean player, already played in Korea, so he's fully land proven. Shot calls people who aren't even Korean. It's like, how many more boxes do you have to check? That's why you know that these guys have something, like a second the camera's off, they must just be absurd that people are willing to literally say, like when they do the whole scales thing, they're just like, but his personality, and that somehow weighs out all the others. Like when fucking Anubis or whatever,
like, he's marketable, he's a big personality, which means a lot to these teams. Like he does have all the boxes, so it has to be something. And I know we're just assuming these things, but I really think that he might be like the first 4-team Overwatch League player in under 2.
Well, one aspect that has kind of been alluded to that isn't even said as like necessarily a direct negative is people do, even when they credit him, make it sound like it is kind of like his way or the highway, like you have to play the way he wants to play. And so as a result, I could actually, just speculation, imagine he's someone where, since it seems in Overwatch especially, people want players to be coachable. Like they want the coaching staff to have a lot of say and to be able to guide what you want to do. So I could imagine just friction there.
Yeah, so obviously if you want, Fissure being as he is, the next move is Boston. Clearly, right? Fits right into that. That I think there's actually.
I would love to see Huck
and Fissure. What I do think though that happens is, like when everyone in the league hypes up a certain player at a specific role, like Jonak, right? Then other players who think they're equal to Jonak, like start getting mad at their team that they're not on that same level. Like Badoshin thinks he's better than Jonak, right? He's like, well, I'm not because they don't give me. I think Badoshin is very good, but I think
Jonak effect.
I think Fissure might be looking at Bumper right now and being like, oh, wow, Bumper gets all this hype and all this praise. If you guys just pocketed me with everything that you possibly have, we could be beating Bumper. So I think that there is that mental aspect of we elevate these stars in the league, and guys who aren't that guy want to be that guy. And I mean, not we personally, well, we personally a little bit, create this internal drama by creating
instant reflection.
Yeah, well, you got to be honest with yourself.
It's the way he did he did the director's commentary in his own brain on his own thoughts that he was thinking at the time. That's pretty next level. That's good. I like that.
And it is true, like, not every team is going to be able to work with Fissure because of the resources he demands and because of the way that you have to play around the shot calling. But I do think that the end result of doing things Fissure's way is amazing to watch. And he's an MVP level player last season who I still think is perfectly capable of repeating that kind of performance if he has the right pieces around him.
Right, but if you're Seoul right now and you're successful without him, I mean, so keeping them for marketing presence because the Seoul fan base is a bunch of, lunatics, or
well done.
I mean, like, I shouldn't have said that, I guess. Now, like, oh,
no,
that's
it's true.
No, come on, surely that can go through. Come on, man.
Nah. Lunatics are great people.
They just call themselves lunatics because they're the old Lunatic High fans. So there you go.
That's what I thought you were referencing. I'm presuming.
Oh, totally. It was. 100% was.
What I think. Here's an interesting thought experiment. Like, what would have happened if Justice had picked up Fissure first and built around him instead of Janice?
I think they'd have more than just the how many wins they have now.
One. Two.
1.
It's greater than 0, but less than 3. Let's start there.
Well, that's also the part, isn't it, that makes him a compelling figure, aside from his personality, is the fact that, so as far as we know, maybe behind the scenes, he's like a corrosive element to the team environment. But in the game, he is clearly a catalyst to people looking better.
Yeah. I think he does amazingly well on the server.
If he was on Justice, I think they would have more than one win for sure. But I think
they would have had shot calling from day one.
I think Justice has some bigger issues than just like the individual performance of Janice, or Yanis, however you want to say it. I think this team, at its core, is like built on this weird idea of wanting to build around this mixed roster, but the team just refuses to communicate and bridge the gap between the two languages. It's kind of weird.
Yeah, I mean, without knowing into the rumor shit, it's just so strange because we heard all these rumors of like budget issues early on, and then someone at the top must have been like, "Oh, we're terrible. Here's a ton of money. Do what you can." And then they go sign Arc, right? It couldn't have been super cheap. So it's just like, I think the people at the very top don't necessarily know esports or what it takes, and I think that trickles down throughout the entire organization. And then possibly ended up giving Wizard a little too much power in trying to bring in his own team. And I think you need checks and balances in that situation.
Cronyism. Classic.
Well, it is esports, Bren. Look, I'm slightly new to esports, but cronyism is not exactly extinct from this industry.
No. Definitely not. And I think, too, with the thing about the Justice, which I find intriguing, is that their ownership doesn't seem to have, from the outside, at least from what I can see, doesn't seem to have much interaction with the team, because honestly, like, the signings that they made very early, and Washington was scrimming a bunch, actually. They were together and scrimming a bunch towards the end of last year. So, and they were doing absolutely terribly in these scrims. There's a reason why everybody thought that this was going to be the worst team in the league coming in, because they had spent months basically just getting dumpstered by even contenders teams and scrims.
Yeah.
Sure.
So at that point, what's confusing to me is, like, where is the ownership? Because shouldn't there have been a conversation where the ownership was like, hey, how are things going in this extended practice period that we have? And shouldn't somebody within the team have said, really fucking bad, we need some more money for players? So at that point, either like somebody was lying to the owners, right? That could have been possible. The owners didn't care. That could have been possible. Or they didn't believe that that was going to be representative of their stage performance. Because what doesn't track is that they're spending money now. You know what I mean? Like, either they knew and they didn't care because they didn't want to spend money, or they didn't know, thought they were going to be better, and then all of a sudden decided to spend the money. Like, it doesn't make sense to do things the way they did, because the Washington Justice themselves had advanced knowledge that they were not going to be good.
Yeah, I'll paraphrase a classic Reddit copy pasta from, it's actually a football culture meme. I don't know if Bren might know this one if he ever follows. I don't know if you follow football at all on Reddit, but basically it goes like this, right? Here's the joke. So the management, the ownership rather, of the Washington Justice went as part of a charity outreach to a local orphanage, and someone was heard to say, now what happens is then the next part is you come to like a quote and it just says, they're kind of pathetic really when you see them up close. You know, what would they even do with money if you gave it to them? Well, you can only help people who help themselves, said Billy, age 8. See the old twitcheroo there? See the old twitcheroo? There you go. There you go. There you go. Anyway, as a more serious note, what do you think on this topic though? Because that, basically, for people who don't know, behind the scenes there were a lot of rumours that implied like they had to cheap out a little bit on the budget, and yet at the same time they'd spent all that money on Wizard Young quite clearly with a massive contract, and then as you say, they did all these like emergency signings at the end, so they're kind of like half in, half out or something bizarre.
Yeah, it's just weird. Like, I don't understand why they would make these signings if they had the, like, why wouldn't they just dedicate the money to getting good players in the first place when they had every opportunity to do so? Like, if you're going to suck and not spend money, just suck and not spend money. Don't suck and not spend money and then spend money and still suck. Like, I don't get it.
Or don't spend money and be good, like Boston.
Sure. But clearly Boston is the only team that has like scouts in this league, so.
Yeah, but I would even say that's part of the problem, Monty, is that the order they did it in is so inefficient. Like, obviously, if they did just come with the big money initially, they could have got some way better players. If they did just gone with, like, an approach where it's like you hire a 6 staff and tell them to scout really carefully, that's another thing. But instead, what they did was get a bad team, and then they tried to literally polish a turd. They were like, well, maybe if you just put this around it and add this in, is this good yet? It's like, no, it's still bad. Afraid not. In fact, the joke is, you mentioned it in jest earlier, at this point in time, if you were looking for a one-person purchase that could potentially upgrade the team the most, it would be to sign Fissure to that team.
I would agree with that.
If you just want one move that could turn it around.
Sign Fissure.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like the team environment can be that great in that team anyway, so what can he ruin, you know?
Yeah, I wonder who's making these calls now, because Washington has been somewhat active, right? They just got Sleepy, which I think is a good call. Let's see if he can play, you know, up to a level that, you know, he used to be considered rather good. It's just that, you know, lost his job to Violet with no shit. So someone's obviously making these calls now, and the assistant GM has stepped down, so I just don't know who's in charge now, but it seems like they're trying to move to the right direction by bringing in Sleepy. So, you
know, by the way, that is what. Speaking of narratives, where you carry over a narrative of a team, and then you would sit down one day and go, "No one's even on that team anymore." That is what I feel about the Shock, where everyone's like, "They improved a lot over the years." It's like, dude, there's no one from the Stage 1 team. It's like, what? That's it, isn't it? Like Nevix as well. That's it. Like, there's no one else there.
Nevix there. Architect is still there, but he
got there late though. He was like
Moth is still there.
He was fairly late though as well.
Moth is still there.
I don't think he was in the beginning.
Wasn't he the? No, because they had Dak, right?
Yeah, they had Dak.
Moth joined the team in March of 2018.
Right.
Well, that was they signed him pretty quickly though. He was before stage. He was in stage 2, I think.
They always had
regardless,
Super
like
International, right, as well.
Yes,
yeah, they did.
But
they were always under contract. They just couldn't play.
Like, but that was the whole thing. Is like, I don't think it's disingenuous to San Francisco because their entire plan was always to wait for Super and Sinatra. And yeah, they made some other signings that didn't end up like working out for them, but they've been building very efficiently. And I think there is a really cool story. Maybe I'll make a video about this because I think we need to go back and like revisit San Francisco's plan that got them to this point, because it's actually really interesting. But they went out there and they scooped up Krusty, who I think is probably the best coach in the league, honestly.
Yeah, I agree.
And I don't think we talk about Krusty enough and what he does, but I think he's really good. And having watched him coach, being at the San Francisco Shock House and stuff like that, and talking to him, and he's very smart and he's extremely active and dedicated. And he has changed a lot of these players for the better. And then also going with Krusty's plan for player pickups, like acquisitions, and Krusty's scouting and the players that they wanted to sign has been really successful for them.
Yeah. I think Sinatra is a great example of this. Like, change what you can change, but don't change the person entirely, so you lost what's special about them. Like, Sinatra plays so much smarter now, just like in the actual game.
Yeah.
And then when they have the chance for Sinatra to be Sinatra and be dumb aggro and sit at spawn, they let him, right? They didn't strip away who he was at his core, but they made him just better in the small areas. I think the same can be said with Super. He used to be ultra aggressive, and now he knows when to step back a little bit. So they've not stripped away what makes these players great. They've just stripped away the small things that were making them poor. I think you're right. The coaching is just insane. And this bench is still sick. Like, if a Tracer meta comes in, Sinatra doesn't have to try to relearn Tracer. He's not been able to play for months. They just bring in Striker. And Sinatra said as much. If you need a Genji, you've got Architect sitting on your bench. Like, it's embarrassing how good this team is.
Yeah, and also, it's not like Sinatra is a slouch at Tracer either. So
not at all.
Sure. Yeah.
But I mean, having Striker, what's interesting about Striker actually is I think he's still third in final blows in the league, in league history. He had something I think he's like third behind Carpe and Prophet in final blows, and we've seen him on like a couple maps this year, and he's
Striker is nuts.
He's crazy good.
He's nuts. Last year I was holding him as the best Tracer in the league. Like that I was firmly believing that, right? A lot of people were saying at the time it was Sabiobi, right? So, but for me it was Striker. I think individually he was in their match against New York. He absolutely dunked on Sabiobi as well, and individually as a one-on-one. But aside from that,
he had a lot less help than Sabiobi as well.
Well, Striker did more with less. He individually won maps for that team. Like Volskaya, I feel like Striker always just won on his own. He's just waiting to get a 3-man pulse bomb, and then they just win.
Also, I mean, this is getting sidetracked from the point I wanted to hit, but when they told him we need a Widowmaker player, pick up Widowmaker, in 2 weeks he's league ready on this role. I mean, obviously a lot of transferable skills, but there's a lot that goes into playing Widowmaker that I think some people don't realize. It's not just clicking heads. A lot of it is positioning and managing your grapple hook cooldown and things like that. But the original point I wanted to hit, if you don't mind, we'll go back on it, is actually coaching, talking about coaching with Krusty. Because I think right now coaching is the last thing in the Overwatch scene that's caught up, at least into almost like a professional level, almost. Because I think there's a big lack, a big gap almost between good coaches right now. And I think that's what separates a lot of these teams. Now, I'm not going to name any names. I don't want to call anyone out in particular. But I think it's, for one, it's like one of the hardest roles to pull out, But I mean, instead of calling someone out, I'll big up Krusty some more. The way I knew Krusty was a good coach, right, is because I spoke to him. I've had numerous conversations with the bloke. Very intelligent, as he said, Monty. I think he's super dedicated to his craft. He just wants to perfect it almost, and he's a fantastic kind of personable person, if you will. I don't know, and
and he's learning English at the same time.
He's learning English at the same time. But the way I knew he was a good coach to get back on track is every player I talked to that he coached said to me that he is one of the best coaches they've ever had. And from what I've known in the Overwatch scene, and from what I've known, I guess, of kids in their early 20s, because I am one, is that they kind of struggle with these positions in authority, and they struggle that on a regular basis. And when people come in and they try and tell them how to play the game, when maybe they haven't even been a professional player in themselves, they kind of like push away from that concept quite hard. And I think that's still happening almost to this day, where a lot of coaches aren't being respected by their teams. But Krusty immediately came down, whipped out the belt, slapped it on the table, and said, "Listen, listen to me now. This is where we're doing it my way." They did it. They got results, and he's got the respect from everyone he's ever coached. So I think that's the true signs and the marks of someone who's actually good in that role.
Yeah,
And
I think you hit on
like he runs around the room and like shouts at players and like he grills them. You know, when I've been around, he'll be like, "Why did you do that?" And like he's like, "Explain it to me." And he's like, "Don't do that," you know. And he'll like curse at people sometimes, and you know, it's an intense experience. But all the it's not like the players hate him. Like the players all really like him because they know he's just trying to make them better. But he's an intense person, and that comes across in his coaching for sure.
I think you've hit something really important, is finding players that fit your coaches or organizational personality. Because at the same note, I think about this Boston team, who I've just been continually impressed by. But there are people who in their young 20s want discipline and want guidance and want to know, like at 9 o'clock every day I go here. And their coaching plays to that as well. I mean, it's Shake, who's been around forever, was a professional player, not in the Overwatch League necessarily, but at some of the highest levels before the Overwatch League came around. And I've talked to a lot of their players, and they're like, yeah, we like it. We really like to know what we're doing, and we like the coaching we get. We go in, and we have this list of things we have to work on, and they're time-stamped on a VOD that Shake has gone over for every single player. And he says, this is what you need to work on. Here's an example of it, and here you go. And so it's just an organizational thing. The people who want to be on Boston are, players who are looking for discipline, and they figured out the culture of their team. And I think that's something we're going to see over the next several years of the Overwatch League, is where teams start to identify a style and a culture, and they go after players that fit that, because you don't just need to piece together talented players. There's enough talented players. You need to start building teams, cohesive personalities, cohesive cultures. And I think San Francisco and Boston have done that actually rather well.
The thing like that's true too, especially about Boston. I think Boston's coaching staff is very good, but they really do have a culture that is reflected in their organization that is basically exactly the same as the NFL team, the New England Patriots.
100%.
Which is that New England Patriots are always like next man up. Like there's always going to be somebody step up there. New England Patriots, an organization that put management and coaching first, and if you don't adhere to, they're a take no nonsense organization. And if you don't adhere to their system, they just get rid of you, and they'll find somebody else who wants to be part of a very disciplined system that results in good, that produces good results, even though they don't necessarily always have the top talent in the league.
Yeah.
They also believe
players look better.
They also believe in meticulously watching VODs of opponents before games. So, just a little joke for any old school fans there. Anyone who's still bitter, like I'm definitely not. No, actually, the thing is though, I would have given that example anyway when you were saying that, Hex, because the two obvious sports examples in America are the Patriots in the NFL, and then in basketball, the Spurs basically have the same philosophy. Because you notice these are small market teams. So as a result, even though they've won championships, the person who owns the team doesn't want to then just like put twice as much money in and try and win next year over the luxury tax. So basically, it's like, what's funny is it's one of those ones where like, it's easy once you've won the championship to sell everyone that you were always trying to like, be very smart with your picks and stuff. No, you did that out of necessity because you didn't want to spend the most money. But once you have established that culture, it can become its own entity. In fact, I would even tie it in before. If you want to use the Fissure example, that would be an interesting team for him to go to, because if you go to that team, you are going there basically saying like, I am going to like have to humble myself. I would give the analogy there to when your old boy Randy Moss joined the Patriots. There was another troublemaker, someone who was supposed to have been booted out, and for a couple of years he held it together because he knew this is the key thing, that you've got to have the winning culture, because the idea is someone who's had trouble in their career sees this as like a last chance, and they go, right, well, if I just sort of like temper it down a bit, this is my chance to win. So the problem is you've got to have that as like the carrot, I think. So I would say that, to be fair, they've been a very good team for the roster they've had.
And also, I think what's true about the Patriots is that, if they have a star player, they will play around that player and be loyal, like we've seen with Tom Brady, right? Like they will build around a core, and that could, I suppose, happen with a player like Fissure. Yeah, one of the interesting things, actually, I don't think I've talked about this publicly before, but obviously the Crafts group was the Patriots were the first people to buy into the Overwatch League. That's public information.
Sure.
But what actually happened was in 2016 at the Overwatch World Cup, when I was in Shanghai, I got a phone call from Jonathan Kraft, where he was basically picking my brain as a former team owner and trying to figure out how to structure their organization. This was before Huck was hired or anything like that. And it was a really interesting conversation. And one of the things he asked me, or he didn't ask me, he was stressing that how important the culture of the team was to them, and that they had to find like the GMs and coaches that were going to fit what they had, what they wanted as the Patriots, because he said to me, like, we need to find our Bill Belichick. That's like literally what he said to me. So they had this in mind, and it's so deeply, I think, embedded in the ownership group. And I think it's been really successful for Boston. I think Huck is like a great person for them, and Shake, or these are great guys that really, I think, fit what they want in terms of their culture. It's cool to see.
And you obviously can't, because now we know that Krusty's gone, we've got the control group. You can't just say it was just Krusty in season 1 and he scouted everyone. No, like ever since he's been gone, they've still done a great job picking people up. I mean, the number of people, here's the thing about their team. That's actually why they do remind me of teams like the Patriots, the Spurs. It's not like they pick these players up and you thought the player was bad and he's like the best player in the league. Most of them, it's like, I don't think he's going to be that good. Oh, he's better than I thought. It's like, that's all you say for most of them, you know. They're never usually that crazy good. So that's a sign of amazing scouting, whoever's doing that job.
The best players they've had on this roster were probably Striker and then Note and
Dream Casper.
Dream Casper too.
Who? What?
I know he never actually did play for them, did he? My bad. I came from an alternate dimension.
Raised from history.
When Nelson Mandela died in prison or something.
I've been Westworld so hard, like doesn't sound like anything to me.
No, exactly.
So what I want to do is talk about Boston, though, because we, all of us, myself included, talk about how great their scouting is. But the funniest thing is that it's really, I actually would say we don't know how good their scouting is, because the scouting of everyone else in Overwatch League is such trash tier that it's really hard to say like how good their scouting would be if other teams were even fucking trying.
Yes.
Because if you look at some of their signings, like Fusions, everybody at the Overwatch World Cup last year was like, this guy is fucking good. He's obviously good. He's shot calling the entire time. Clearly, this is a guy that at least should be a bench player in the Overwatch League, because why wouldn't you take a shot at a great main tank who can shot call? Yeah. Why not?
And see, the problem is too, when I talk to some of these players like Color Hacks, I'm like, oh, so what was the tryout system like? And he's like, well, Boston's the only team that even gave me a tryout.
Yep.
Like, I mean, like they're literally the only teams like willing to spend a couple hours in seeing if this talent is actually good from another region, and other teams are like, so who's your friend you played on in Korea Contenders? All right.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
So I think
it's actually tragic how the EU region and the Oceanic region just gets left to the side in regards to all there is unreal talent tapped in that.
Bren, who gives a fuck about players like Fusions who speak their native language of English, can shot call and are good main tanks, when there's players like Jay Innes out there?
Sure.
Sorry, did I mispronounce that? My bad. I meant Janus.
Marketable. Marketable.
I mean, it's just bizarre. There's an unreal amount of talent just waiting to be brought up into the league.
I mean, Alamau is sitting on the bench for Boston too. Like some of these guys,
he was the best player on Brazil. At the World
some
Cup.
of these guys, this is the only tryout they got though. Like even guys like Note weren't getting tryouts last year from other teams, and Boston's like, oh, you're really good. And now we look at Note like, how did nobody sign?
It is actually pathetic. So I think it is funny because like Huck must be just chuckling to himself, because he's like, this is the easiest praise I've ever gotten, because I do basically like
I do my job.
I schedule a 2-hour script where
level,
no one else
and
does.
I look like a fucking genius. Like what the actual fuck? Like Huck must be loving this. Because it again, it's not even that hard. I remember when we were doing like the Overwatch World Cup, it wasn't like some sort of revelation that Alamau. I remember casting Brazil's games in Los Angeles at that World Cup stop and saying on broadcast, Alamau is a very good Lucio player. Like somebody should probably give him a tryout.
It's not even the fact that like people don't get picked up. Like what blows my mind is that they don't even get tryouts. What are you so busy with? You can't schedule a 2-hour block of tryouts and see like, oh, he's legit good against the players we have on this team. Maybe we'll do another round of tryouts. No one's even trying these players out. It blows my.
Same thing with Kib, right? Kib was another great performer at the World Cup. And I literally talked to Guangzhou about Kib, and they were like, yeah, he had a good performance at the World Cup, so we looked at him and tried him out, and now he's on the roster of the Charge. But it is hilarious. Like,
my joke would be that they just use him like the same way that you need like a Korean when you're in Korea. They just use him to order takeout. He just does the Uber Eats for them.
He gets actual playtime.
Sure, it's a joke. Yeah.
What I find funny though as well is that they haven't realised that the real key to success in the Overwatch League is you just hire these UK players, because not only are we better than the US players, we speak English, and we're better on camera as well. So you get a great package. You win games, and you also have somebody who can do the post game interviews and actually just not really drop their spaghetti out of their trousers.
I think the issue is a lot of teams can't afford a hot tub, and what I've learned about UK players is that if you don't have a hot tub every night, it's a no.
Yeah, we got a little.
You guys love
private Discords message group with all the UK players in LA and whatnot, and it is just hot tub every night.
It really is.
Man, that's the Discord that if it ever gets leaked is going to just wipe out an entire fucking subculture. Oh, of course. That's just done if that ever gets leaked. And not even, by the way, I'm not implying
by banter.
No, but that's the best thing. I'm not even implying it would be any sort of like massive scandal, like some really terrible crime. It would just be the jokes alone would get everyone would be fired.
Sure. You already know. You're not even in it, and you already know what it's like.
Of course, of course.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I just find it funny that like, especially this last season. So the expansion teams literally had a month where none of the other teams could sign players. Like they had a month of a signing window to grab whoever they wanted before the existing Overwatch League teams could get new talent. And look at what was fucking done.
Yeah. It was like me writing papers in college, like the night before. I'm like, I got to sign a team, I guess. What's the best Korean contender team? Okay, let me get half of X6. Any Element Mystic out there? Let's add a dash of that. Our luxury watch is still around, a dash of that. All right, sweet. I have a good team.
Yeah.
And plus, I can just imagine those, like, like in the movie where they try to show like some owner who's out of touch. He's like, bring me the tank from that team. It's like, here you go. That's the wrong one. I meant the other one. Like, you can imagine half those scenarios as well. Like,
I just don't get it too, because like you'd think if you were spending tens of millions.
By the way, actually, as an aside, I've just remembered there's a real anecdote. That joke thing that I just described there, I was doing it as like a trope from movies. That actually did happen for real in football back before they got to the point where they could watch every league. Supposedly, it was a British guy, played for like Norwich or something. He actually got signed by like a top Italian team in like the 80s, AC Milan, because they thought they were signing another player who is of the same ethnicity. And they literally just signed the wrong one. And then it's only like later that they were like, wait a minute, that's not the guy we signed. And they just signed like a good player, but they were trying to sign like John Barnes or some like legendary player, that's one of those ones where you think to yourself, how could no one between saying get that guy and putting a contract with a different name on in front of, how was no one stepping in that process? Like, are we sure this is the right guy? We're going to sign for millions, yeah? Like, come on.
It actually happened in No Country for Old Men, the movie, because it's supposed to be Tommy Lee Jones and James Brolin. The older Brolin, because they're war veterans. And then Josh Brolin showed up. Yeah, Josh Brolin showed up. And I don't know.
Jay Brolin, get me Jay Brolin. Get me Jay Brolin now.
Just rewrite the script that he's from Vietnam, and we'll make him look kind of older.
Yeah, he wasn't actually. You're right. That was one of the movies that kind of put him on the map. Wasn't he? He wasn't that famous at the time. Yeah.
Oh, it was Goonies and then No Country. Nothing in between.
That's a fucking skip right there. Goonies to No Country for Old Men.
I don't think that's true, but it's funnier.
That's also a hell of a fucking double header if you want to watch a movie this weekend. Start with Goonies, the irreverent and ridiculous story, and go straight into No Country for Old Men, and then just black out at that point in time.
Honestly, if you write a paper about how they're thematically similar, and no English professor will argue with you enough to not give you an A+. You're like, holy shit, whatever.
Of course.
Yeah,
I'm just trying to not make any jokes about like someone attempting to use critical theory to dissect Goonies or No Country for Old Men. So we'll leave all those jokes off the show, boys. That's for a different games podcast. So moving on, what do you actually? I noticed two teams we almost never talk about, Monty. Except we talked a little bit about Spark. Is Spark and Charge? And part of the reason why is people are so underwhelmed / baffled by these teams. So come on, let's get these guys. Right,
well, we talked about Charge last episode.
A little bit we did. What would you say about the Spark? Who is this team?
About the Spark.
I think the Spark are more confusing than the Charge to me. I kind of know who the Charge are.
I was so high on this team coming into the league, though.
Everyone was.
It annoys me to no end that we keep talking to players. Like the other day, we had Big Goose on the desk coming into stage 2, and he was like, "Yeah, Spark are pretty good in scrims." I'm just like looking at them play now, and they're just dog shit, aren't they? Just like not good.
Hey, that's not fair. They actually did well this week.
Did they? I mean,
yes.
I have very high standards when it comes to it. I mean, what were their results against the Charge? It was a map
did
fight,
you
right?
Did you just utter the sentence? I have very high standards.
Maybe internally he does. You know,
very high standards for these teams. I mean, I don't know what to tell you. I just have not been impressed by the Spark, and I've been so high up on them because of Gouchway as an individual player. When he came into the World Cup, like this guy. Gouchway is a player, by the way. He's known in China for his primal blades because of the amount of value he gets out of his primal rage ultimate. It's like a dragon blade. He just gets kills with it. It doesn't matter who's where or what. His individual mechanics on that role are so impressive. But it's just a shame to see that it's kind of. I feel like it comes down to again communication because they've got these Chinese players in the form of Crystal Gouchway on this Korean roster, and they're just we don't see the same Gouchway that we saw in the Overwatch World Cup.
I actually don't think that's it at all. I think like this week actually it's a quality loss for them in my opinion, and they did say like they found their style, that they want to be more aggressive, that they're tired of playing passively. I think
they looked pretty good.
Monty's mentioned, you mentioned there was like a lot of nerves on that team, and I think that's true. I think now they're just letting loose and going a little bit wilder, and I think the Charge is the same case where young players trying to get on that stage and just trying to understand it, and now that they're all playing more aggro, it really suits their styles. I'm not high on either of these teams, but I wouldn't be stunned in like a stage 3 or 4 if they make stage playoffs. Also,
I do appreciate.
I apologize for the Charge constantly because 6 of their losses are to the Gladiators,
that's true.
Shock, and Titans. Literally 6 losses to the top 4 teams.
Yes,
that's just unfair.
I do appreciate the condescension there, though, Hexagrams. You finally made it now as a tier 1 caster, as opposed to just say something like, well, Bren, that's an interesting opinion. I have a different opinion. That you just said, I don't think it's that at all, actually. Anyway, you haven't seen nothing. This is what happened to me one time. Well done. You did alpha mail with the group.
I can't be overly confident in it because I was in a fever dream at the time of the Charge Shock match. Genuinely, I was in bed over there. I tell you my fever dreams.
You were sending WhatsApp messages at 5 a.m. that you don't remember sending.
Yeah, it was ridiculous. I dreamt that I started the Notre Dame fire and I was on the run for 6 hours.
We don't know that you
all
didn't.
6 hours of it.
Man alive.
I remember all 6 hours of it. It was bizarre.
You're so close to the edge right now, you don't even know it. So anyway, let's save Bren from himself.
So the shock, like I thought. So first off, I think Charge, obviously, we're looking a little bit better this week. I don't want to hype, like ultra hype the Spark or the Charge. I just thought the Spark were looking better. Okay. I think that Paris map that they played against the San Francisco Shock was really good Overwatch, just all the way around. And so I think the Spark do have moments of brilliance. I like the fact that they're mixing in Crystal into the roster now. I think they do look more cohesive than we've seen them previously. I'm still waiting to see where this goes. Like I have a small, like a spark of hope has been rekindled within me. Let's put it that way.
Well, they have 3 games left, right? They play Chengdu Hunters, Paris Eternal, and Seoul, it looks like. So here's the question is, you've all given different opinions. Which of these 3 teams do they beat? Chengdu Hunters, Paris Eternal, Seoul Dynasty.
I think they'll win Paris.
I think they'll win both their games next week against Chengdu and Paris and lose to Seoul.
That's fair.
Oh, I think they'll lose to Paris. I think they'll lose to Seoul, and I think they'll beat Chengdu. I actually am pretty high on Paris still, compared to a lot of other people right now.
Come on then, let's pivot.
And people say the European Union's dead.
Right. So, Bren, I will just refer you to your earlier comments about having incredibly high standards when it comes to teams. Now, please elucidate why you think the Paris Eternal is good after all you've seen.
Because he's got to go back to that Discord.
Yeah, I've got to go back to Cruise. I can't really be
right
now, you know. No, but genuinely, I think that they have looked much better now that they can flex Shadowburn onto damage dealer roles, like on his Farah when they play these anti kind of goats compositions when they want to play it. I think they've looked way better now that Grey's in instead of Heap. Like the one switch out there with the flex support means that they're no longer overlapping support elements from what I've seen at all in any of their official games. I've been keeping an eye out on this because it was one of the biggest errors that we saw in Stage 1 from them was just constantly fucking up the support ults every single time. Stage 2, I've seen honestly, I can't remember any instance of that happening. I think they've looked way better in that regard. I think Cloudy is he's had a bit of a. I think he was to begin with better than Ben Best, but now he's kind of dropped off a little bit. I will admit, but I think that this roster is. I don't know. I think people right now are rating them as a bottom tier team. I don't think that. I think they're mid-table, maybe if you're going to be harsh on them, bottom mid-table.
Yeah. Let me start making a big case for the Charge here. I already talked about their schedule, and that's brutal. 6 of those losses, any other team would have lost them anyway.
Also, they don't play any of those teams again for the rest of the season.
It's already over. It's already over. They've gone through Murderer's Row already. But I think this team, the biggest weakness right now is Chara, and he fed so hard yesterday on so many different maps, and they still came. I also think putting Kib in, as much as I like Kib, over Eileen just limits your versatility. Like, when Kib's in, they're going to play mostly a Brigitte kind of meta. So they could end up bringing in, maybe if Only Wish ever gets here, over Chara. Then you've got Only Wish and Shu as your backline. Rio played way better yesterday. Hotba's the leader of this team and flexes over to everything. Hoppa played a better Zarya than Happy yesterday, which was insane. And I think they just run with the Doomfist meta until someone proves they can stop it. I think it's going to crush.
Eileen's a great Sombra too. So the thing is, you can swap between the Doomfist and the Sombra. And Eileen can take over games. We saw it. They literally beat the Spark just by playing Doomfist. Basically.
And I don't think that's going to beat top tier teams, but that goes back to the schedule. They don't have to play top tier teams anymore. I think a Doomfist wreaks so much havoc in the back line. You can see Dogman just like, what do I do? And then that tilts a team and out of the face of the earth. So I think if they can stabilize their starting 6 or just make Chara play just a little bit more passively, they could be a team that beats all the other teams in front of them because they don't have to play anyone good anymore.
I disagree about the Doomfist aspect.
Did you see it? Were you there?
Yes. Yeah, they're playing against Atlanta Reign, mate. Like Atlanta Reign that on the best days, surely they beat New York. But
I know, but they're not going
to really beat the Spark with it too.
They're not going to have to play top tier teams anymore. I just told you they already played.
But I just don't. I don't think it's good. I mean, it's like it's in that weird zone where Sureforce flexing onto Reaper and May. You know what I mean? Yeah,
but like then,
sure, they're playing against shitters now, but I don't know.
Okay, Doomfist is not on the same level of Reaper. Let's not go that far. But no, I think you keep Eileen in, and like the comms look like we got back. I've been so impressed with Hotba. Like I never knew Hotba had this in him to play all of these heroes at high levels.
In this roster.
Yeah, and then if you start going to Widow maps, Happy can play his good heroes again. Like I really think that they can make a run in stage 3 like playoffs. I think they make a stage playoff. That's my bold prediction.
They need to make a run, don't they?
They don't really need to.
They have every opportunity to make a run. That's the thing.
Sure.
The organization also has like great support for these players. They're in a really good spot there. And the organization actually is like, this year we think we can do okay, but we're looking long term. And I think they've signed a long-term roster here. I just also think like you just always play Eileen over Kib. Better Sombra, better Doom.
My boy Kib though as well. Stop doing him dirty like that.
I'm not doing him dirty. He's a fine Brigitte. I'm telling you, it telegraphs their composition.
Let me tell you about his outside the Brigitte. When he's out of that brig prison, Hex, magic's gonna happen. Trust me.
He plays a Sombra that's not as good as Eileen. Is what
he's an unreal Genji. Honestly, a lot of people don't realize this about Kib.
I know. I remember that.
He's an unreal Genji. So I think we move into a meta potentially where you see more damage dealers. Kib will shine. But yeah, just don't do my boy dirty.
Yeah, I've just given up hope that we're going to move into that meta. Sorry. I mean, everyone's like, look at stage 2, and I'm like, okay. 3-3 is run 70% of the time still in stage 2.
Metagame nihilism now.
Look, I look at actual facts. We're still running 70% 3-3.
No, that's always the way I go hexagrams. Like as soon as something annoys me enough and other people don't share my annoyance, I just literally start wanting the world to burn. Like I want the worst thing to happen in every format. I want like the player who's like the problem to just blow the whole team up. I want everything to go terribly.
Yeah.
And then obviously at the end to just come in like, I did tell you guys. Like that was obviously the most petty element of it all.
And also the most fun. So
of course, yeah.
I'm not above being petty. I want 100% 3-3 so that they have to blow it up.
If we go the other way then, a team who has had not a hard schedule and has as a result looked really good in the standings is the London Spitfire. So if you look at the standings, the old crap LCS style narrative, like, wow, they really turned it around. It's like, yeah, when you play bad teams, like it's easier to win. I don't know if you're aware of like how matchups work. So what do you actually think about the London Spitfire in 2019?
We're still not going to know until several weeks from now, because next week they should win 2 easy games.
They play Paris and Chengdu for anyone wondering, and then after that,
and it pains me to say that because I'm
Houston
the founding
last.
member. I'm the founding member of the Church of Chengdu, but I do think London will beat them. The promising thing from London is that they're not letting bad teams hang with them.
Yes.
So like 4-0s are what I've wanted from London. Like you're a better team. We all know you're a better team than this. So just play up to that potential. So I want to see that continue through next week, but we're not going to really know until they have to play someone good.
I mean, I would have a lot less faith in London if what we needed from London, what we needed to see was a very convincing win, and they slammed Boston. Yeah. And I think that's what really gives me confidence that they can hang in the stage playoffs with a lot of the better teams, is that London was still having the problems where they don't seem to understand how to play 3-3 and they don't know when to swap compositions. They looked so much better against Boston. So for me, obviously, like they need to slam the rest of the teams also going through to the end of the stage, especially given their, I would say, easier opponents in Paris, Chengdu, and the Outlaws. But if they're winning all those matches like 4-0 or like, 3-1, but the one map is close and the other three are just like total domination, then I think we can have a conversation about London potentially being a contender for stage playoffs. But we've got to see more, I think. But at least like the glimmer is now there in a way that it wasn't at any other point in this season based on their recent performance.
It's like what you guys are hitting on. We're not going to know the true form or potential of this London right now, where they're at, until playoffs rolls around, because they're going to make playoffs. I mean, it's just it's a no-brainer given the teams they're up against.
I mean, London's a team that could go out 0-4 in like the first round of the playoffs, or 0-3 or whatever, or they could accidentally win the whole thing. And I say I'm actually way, but like what like they could accidentally just be like, oh yeah, we're a good team. I forgot.
That's what I said before. I mean, remember like when I was talking about the season playoffs last year, where I was like, you never know. Like if London has such insane individual talent that if it clicks at the right time, they are capable of just winning anything.
It's the ultimate puncher's chance, basically.
Yeah, they always have it.
I'm super high on Gesture, actually. I think a lot of people, I mean, we don't really talk about Gesture that much these days.
He's been flamed a lot this season, though, mate. People are a fan of his Reinhardt.
I think that's been overstated. His Reinhardt's actually been decent.
It's not that bad. Like I think that's like a Reddit narrative that keeps getting driven around, and there's nothing worse than them. We all know that. There's
Redditor Jones.
Redditor Jones coming at it with the Redditor analysis. But
is that like the esports version of that meme that people created, like Florida Man, where if you just Google Florida Man, there's a million things like Florida Man.
Redditor Jones comes from like all the LG Evil guys. It's like Lost. Yeah,
that's good. I like that.
Yeah. So I think he's pretty good. I mean, you've got Fury alongside him, and I mean, the Reddit narrative right now is that Fury is the best player that's ever existed and ever will exist. So, I mean, I've been saying that for the longest time as well. I don't want to toot my own horn, but
you've also been saying that for the longest time. That you've been saying it for the longest time, a month in a row.
He's his own promoter as well as be himself.
I love it. Yeah, but I think that this team's got, like Monty said, they've got fantastic individual pieces, and if they all come together at the right time, they might just make a run for it all the way.
I will never count out a team with Profit on it. I still think he remains being he's just constantly that good, and it's starting to become this like NYXL syndrome of like he's just so good all the time that people forget. People forget that Profit is like playing off heroes and then just dominating on it still. And I mean, he dragged them kicking and screaming through a couple of matches last year before season playoffs.
Yeah, I think Profit is, making a case to be MVP of the season. Like he definitely is going to be in the conversation. I think it would be hard to argue that he isn't the best DPS player in the league, given his flexibility, because even star players like last year, Who are our star DPS players? Well, SBB's on the bench. Striker's on the bench. Carpe is not a great Zarya player, and he's
not as bad.
Sinatra would make a claim for it.
Sure, but Sinatra is playing two heroes in Sombra and Zarya. I'm just saying, like, over time, it is becoming increasingly clear that Profit is the best DPS player to have played in the Overwatch.
Oh, yeah. Did he not even make the All-Star game last year?
No, he didn't.
Yeah, that's just ridiculous.
Because I remember at the season finals of the Barclays, I'm doing this ESPN thing, and they're like, why didn't Profit make the stage playoffs? And I almost lost my mind live on camera. I'm like, I have no idea. What are you guys doing? I'm slamming the desk. Like, our idiot fans don't know how to vote for the best player in the league.
I mean, we do have idiot fans, though.
But they're good fans. They're good. They support the league very well. We're the number one watched Twitch channel. They do support it.
Yeah, I actually do like our fans. I mean, Monty,
Of course you
probably
do.
do not, but I mean, I really do. I think I
like them. Just don't let them have a say in what happens. Like, listen, I don't care who's down there, rowing the boat, but don't let them be the one who steers the ship.
Look, it's the All-Star game. Let them have whoever they want in the All-Star game.
Can we talk about our fans and what they are voting on right now? You ready for this?
Come on.
I'll read you the Atlantic and Pacific teams as they stand.
Okay.
There we go. Hit me.
Okay, go.
And Bren, remember, you said you like these fans, okay?
I do, but this is also including the Chinese fans and everyone else and all the different
Right.
regions.
Okay. He's doing all the fans.
All the people. Put that out there. Right, go on, Monty. Go on.
Atlantic Division is Jonak, Arc, Carpe, Pine, Poco, and Fusions.
Dude, don't you remember that Pine game he had earlier last year?
So wait a minute. You mean Pine is just going to become,
not
because
played
he's
a
such a
single
fan
map.
favourite, he's going to get voted. He's the mad life of this game, basically. 'Cause for people who don't know, in League of Legends, even years after some of the top Koreans were really good, they were just so popular, they would still be voted in the All-Star game like 3 years after their prime, basically. Like, and it didn't matter who was good instead at the time.
Yeah.
Like, you could never sort of like beat the inertia that the players had.
See, like I'm fine with All-Star voting and what being just like for
It
the
is for
fans
fun,
and whoever
sure.
what they want to see,
Yeah.
but like we just need a supplement to that of like all pro voting,
Yes,
where actually
agreed.
people who watch
Yeah.
games and stuff. Because like right now, like if you looked at it, like who are the All-Stars, and then
Yes,
Pine hasn't
agreed.
played a game this year, it's a little embarrassing.
Yeah, it is super embarrassing. And I love Pine. Don't get me wrong. I
That's
want to
great.
see Pine play Overwatch again. I hope we get that opportunity. But when he hasn't played a single map for NYXL and Profit, like,
Sure.
I don't even know what to say about that. Like,
He's like
mean,
a good, Prophet
there's
is a
nothing to
GOAT
say.
contender if you consider how many years he's been good now. Every year, basically.
I think part of this as well, though, is that we have us as the talent as well. I don't think we've done a good job bringing Profit up as an
That's
individual.
true. That's
So
very
I think, part of the blame is going to have to be shifted to us. And a part of the reason Pine is in now in this All Stars, I don't think it's a bad thing, people voting in these players, but because we built him up as his name. I mean, Doa literally coined Big Boss Pine.
Yep.
We gave him this title. We turned him into a bit of an icon. So
That arc pick's a little bit. That's a bit questionable, isn't it?
Well, see, Ark's got a personality. And
I get
people
that,
him,
sure.
right?
he's
That's
also he's a fan favorite of both Korea and the Western
That's
audiences, because he speaks
So-
That's true.
So here's the Pacific Division. You ready?
I
Jayhong.
thought we were done.
I'm out
No,
already.
we're
I'm
not
out
done.
already.
That was
Right?
just
I'm out.
Atlantic.
I'm out already. You got me. You had me at Jehong. I'm out.
Jayhong, Eviltal, Jinmu, Fleta, Gushue, and Among.
What I love is that Fletter's in there. Obviously, a great player who doesn't even get to play for his own team. Like, this is a nightmare. This one's worse than the other one.
I can make a case for 3 of those.
How about Eviltal? Can you make it? Please,
No, I cannot make
somebody
that
make a case for
I mean,
Eviltal.
I can get Amon and Jinmu. I get because they have dominant performances and people just love the hamster. Like that, I get that.
Sure. I think Evital, though, it must be something that just we don't know coming from the Western audience side. I think he must be just a big star in China.
Maybe because he's named after a Pokemon. People just saw a familiar name. They clicked on it.
Is that actually what he's named after? I
yeah.
didn't even
Apparently,
know
it says that on his. It says that on the Wikipedia. Yeah,
I mean that's
now.
that's
So
not
basically,
out of
if
the realm of
Prophet was
possibility.
named Bulbasaur, he'd be fucking in the All-Star game right now. There we go.
Next time I cast London, I'm gonna be Prophet, aka Bulbasaur.
There you
Go
go.
ahead.
You have to say it like bowl cut, Bulbasaur.
Exactly.
There you go.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, the also like I'm fine with it. The NHL does something goofy like that. The NBA knows it's an exhibition
Yes.
as well. The problem
Yeah.
is we don't have like the end of the year AP All Pro awards or something
Yes.
like that. Of
Like you said,
okay,
there
you
needs to
guys
be a
had your-
serious version.
Here, you had your fun. Here's
Well,
actually
like, the
what's
pro,
happening.
the Pro Bowl, but I don't know. I feel like at least in the Pro Bowl,
The
NFL
Pro Bowl's
fans,
fan voting now too, though.
Yeah,
Yeah, it
but
is.
I'm saying the fans in the Pro Bowl normally get it mostly right.
Sure.
Right, but
This
when you
is-
talk, well, like when you talk amongst serious NFL fans about accolades, no one takes the Pro Bowl seriously anymore. They're saying, okay, how many All Pros, how many first team All Pros, how many second team All Pros? No one cares about the Pro Bowl, largely because the best players take it off, and so you've got like the
Yes.
6th QB who's starting the Pro Bowl, and like, okay, so now we have 900 Pro Bowl players. Is that what happened? Because you guys are all skipping, and it just makes no sense anymore to use that as a ranking of how good a player is.
By the way, Monty, I just want to reference, because I want to get your take on this, right? As an aside, since I randomly mentioned Bulbasaur, right? I know you're already not a big fan of people who don't ever look into it, but just go around preaching the Bible of Myers-Briggs test, right? Of like, oh, shot a person. Well, there's got to be an even worse version of that, which is millennials going like, what was your starting Pokemon? As well, you can tell a lot about a person. It's like, what do you want about? I was 7 and I had a Game Boy. What does that tell you about my life? I picked one of 3 characters, you fucking idiot.
Dude, legit adults who are millennials, who are in their 30s, are still discussing which Harry Potter houses they're in.
Jesus Christ!
I can't wait for that to
my
be
own
like
generation.
It's like the new horoscope thing, right? It's like, oh, I knew it wasn't going to work because deep down I'm a Ravenclaw and she's a Slytherin, and it's just like I should have known. I should have known.
You kill me though, because people like that exist. So it's like
it's in large numbers. The majority of the population is like that.
Large numbers, staggering, and it's like you realize that. So here's the thing about these young adult books, and they all play on these tropes, right? Which is that it plays to like human tribalism, right? Because they're made to be read by teenagers who are developing personalities. So they're using exterior systems to define their own personalities, right? And we've come to the point where even adults are doing that now.
Yes.
Because the analogy would be like this, okay? So when you play the game Overwatch, just while you're playing the game, you pretend to be a character that has limited. It would be like if you just played and you were like, I really like Tracer, so I'm just going to go around telling people I am Tracer and I have all the qualities of Tracer. And actually, like as a person, I just am Tracer. And so, who would do that?
Developing like an interesting and unique identity is hard. So I just want this shortcut. I want to tell people I'm half Irish and that's my identity as an American. God, I hate those people.
No, what you do is you're half Irish, a 16th German, a 12th Norwegian, and you're a huge nerd because you like the Star Wars movies, which is like, you told me nothing about yourself. I haven't even got to the beginning of your personality yet. Like this is shit from a quiz at the moment. Like, you're just filling out like what your favorites are. What?
Oh, Lord.
So that Overwatch game,
right? Let's do this then, Bren.
And that's my daily dose of misanthropy. There you go.
There you go. Right, Bren, pick a team that we haven't talked about that would be interesting to talk about. Who would you volunteer here?
I'm going down the list here. Gladiators. Let's talk about Gladiators.
Top of the league.
Do we think that Gladiators are the 4th best team right now?
No, I would like this amalgamation of like 4 through 6 is all like the same.
Are you implying the Gladiators could be the 6th best team?
Yes.
Okay. Reasons why?
I mean, like you have your top 3, but I think it's really hard to just be like top 4 right now. The Gladiators didn't like 4-0 the other day, and they didn't play super clean. So like we're just desperate for some reason to want this like top 4 because it's an even number, I guess. I don't know, it's cleaner. But like there's top 3, and then there's like a bunch of teams that we don't know yet. Could be the 4th, 5th, 6th. You talk about like London in this mix.
Sure. I mean, yeah, it's gonna be difficult to tell this again until playoffs. But based on what we've seen so far, given the fact that they beat Seoul pretty convincingly, previously people put Dallas in the same boat as like Gladiators on the similar level, right? I'm going to call him out. Josh Wilkinson, if you're listening to this, you were the one who said this. You said potentially Dallas could be the 4th best team in the league. They are not. They lost.
It's the way he went from people to them to it was just Sideshow, and I really want to call it Sideshow.
I'm going to call him out.
He said Dallas was the 4th best team in between apologizing for the Valiant every chance he got.
Yeah. So
man alive.
The one argument you
can
make
go a little hard on that. They go a little hard on that one.
London, they haven't played them yet. London could be again another candidate for it, but. I mean, right now, Gladiators, they don't look super clean, but I think outside of the big top 3, none of these teams look super clean.
So
I have London, Seoul, Lag as like top 4 contender.
Yeah, I think that's pretty reasonable. I understand like the reluctance around Gladiators, and I still share some of it, but also I think you have to look at Gladiators as when they lose, they've been losing on Hanamura or their assault maps. Like sometimes on their assault maps, I guess they lost Florida,
shuffle, right?
Yeah, they lost to Florida on Busan, but yeah, they lose Hanamura's,
This tilts me to no end, Monty. Actually, you've fired the synapses in my brain, and you've triggered the memories, right, of this point as to why I really dislike
literally triggered.
Why don't they just run triple tank, triple supports when they can do it so well? Why do they keep trying to flex in and slot in Surefour into these compositions when he's playing bloody Reaper or May or whatever? Sometimes it works against shit teams, sure, but like.
They can win matches and sell jerseys at the same time.
I don't care, mate.
The fans voted him into the game.
Make sense.
So,
well,
fans voted him in a start.
We will really figure out if the Gladiators are a legit team in their next 3 matches. Here's what they got. They have Boston coming up. They have Dallas after that. They have Vancouver. We're going to know exactly who the Los Angeles Gladiators are after these next 3 matches.
They don't play Vancouver at this stage, though. That's the thing. They only play
it's
Boston this stage. We're going to figure it out in the stage playoffs. Like, and then we're going to see him in the stage playoffs, and then we'll actually have real information.
It's just so crazy. Like, some of these teams have already played 6 matches, and other teams have played like 3. Like, the scheduling has thrown me off this year on trying to gauge what teams are good and bad, just because it's just a whole different schedule.
I mean, I think they're definitely top 6. It's just where they are in that top 6 is the question.
Yeah, and I think they have that potential to beat some of these top teams too, and that's really how I lock in my 3-6 or 4-6. Could they potentially beat these other teams? I think their 3-3 is good enough to take a map. I think they've got the curveball potential to take maps because they are willing to run different stuff here and there. So I can see the Gladiators beating one of the top 3.
Okay.
I don't think so.
You don't think they could beat New York on an off day?
If New York are having an off day, sure, yeah. But I think when the teams are playing at their average levels, there's no chance in hell. Maybe no. I think there is quite a large gap actually between the big top 3 right now and the rest of the teams in the league. So much so that I don't think even if the Gladiators are playing at their peak, I don't think they would really beat them. On an average day, obviously.
They're 9-4. And they've got a good record.
I mean, have they played any difficult teams?
I don't know, but 2 of those losses were in the early on, right? When they didn't have Decay.
Yes, they didn't have Decay, and then they lost another one. They were like 1-4 there, 1-3 for a while, but it was right after. It was right after Decay came too. They were looking kind of shaky.
It's why the shock record is deceiving as well. They lost 2 games without Violet. I think they lost 2 without Violet. They at least lost 1.
I mean, we can talk too about how the Shock haven't even lost or drawn a map yet, and they have 2 series left. They may just win every map in this stage.
Who do they have?
That's ridiculous.
They play the
Philly
Fusion and then
Dragons.
The Shanghai Dragons. So the Philly question is the real one, right?
Well, the Dragons are good
Dragons
too.
as well. Dragons are decent. Yeah.
No, but you'd figure Philly could get 1 map, surely.
Or the Dragons. I think that's going to be hard. Like, they'll probably win both of those matches, obviously, but I think it's going to be hard to just sweep them on every map.
Yeah, I think Philly ends up taking a map because I'd imagine all their focus is on Shanghai, given how highly the players on the Shock talk about how good Shanghai is, how good Shanghai's DPS. So I think they probably over-prepare for Shanghai, and maybe Philly sneaks up and takes a map or 2. Philly just doesn't seem like a team that gets swept very often. I could be wrong, but that's my gut feeling on it.
Been looking better at this stage too, so.
Yes, they have. They've been looking improved. Philly, another team that I think, again, it's a similar situation to London, isn't it? When they're all playing up to their potential, they can really, I guess, make a lot of these top teams sweat a little bit.
I still think London has a higher ceiling than Philadelphia.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Yeah, I'm not debating that.